Not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Mental Health News Radio, produced by MHNRnetwork.com, your source for information about our favorite subject, mental health. This show is brought to you by our incredible sponsors like ZenCharts.com, the intelligent EHR for addiction treatment organizations, and MyGenetics, that's MyGenetx.com, changing the way people are diagnosed and treated around the world, helping you better understand what makes you well. Don't you want information about yourself that empowers your mental health treatment? Also, who is minding the store, the finances of your behavioral health organization? TriadicLLC.com, that's TRIADICLLC.com, is a full-service revenue cycle management and billing company focused on all the ins and outs of mental health billing. Our sponsors help keep this show on the air and advocating for everyone affected by mental health. Guess who that is? Everyone in the world. Take a listen to our show all the way to the end. You don't want to miss Miles the Therapy Dog's special goodbye. Good morning, everyone. This is Kristin Walker, host of Mental Health News Radio, and I am here with the wonderful Helaina Hovitz. Hi, Helaina.
Hello. I'm so excited to be back.
We are too. I'm excited to have you co-hosting with me on shows. I love it. Hopefully we'll hear some New York in the background while you're on this morning.
The usual, unfortunately, stereotypical sirens and other things that always manage to make their way into any radio or podcast that I do.
Absolutely.
Sure.
The sounds of the city. And we have with us Brett Buchert, who has an interesting company, it's actually technology based, which I love, and with a wonderful message behind it. Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
Absolutely. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you've created.
My name's Brett, and I'm a fairly recent college graduate, and I studied psychology. And in my gap year before going on to graduate school, I decided to make an app to track the symptoms and treatments for a condition called PMDD. It's something that I've struggled with in my life, and so it was originally just to, help myself track the condition better. But now it's become, it's like its own company, and the app is international. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
So what does PMDD stand for?
It stands for Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder, and it's a pretty horrible condition that can affect up to about 1 in 20 women in their reproductive years. And it leads to symptoms of extreme depression and rage, anxiety, panic attacks that occur coinciding with the menstrual cycle during the premenstrual phase.
Right, and there's a lot of stereotypes around that as well that are not very helpful by any means.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So, Helaina, why was this an important topic for you too? Because I had told you we've never talked about this on the show, but boy, am I glad that we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So full disclosure, this is something I live with too, and I'm so shocked continuously at the lack of information and awareness, and women who know that they are living with this. And, I think, as women, right, it's such a struggle because PMS and PMDD, right, they're not excuses to behave badly, which I think unfortunately gets a bad rap. And I don't know any women who use it as one. I think if anything, we almost feel like ashamed or guilty or embarrassed, but certainly don't use it as an excuse, but it's a reason and it's a cause for so many physical, mental, and emotional changes. And it is extremely powerful. And so I believe we have a responsibility to figure out how to manage this and make life as bearable as possible for ourselves and those around us during this time. But before we can take action, before we can take responsibility, before we can even have awareness, we have to know what we're looking for, just like any other diagnosis that affects our mental health. And the thing with PMDD is it's something you self-diagnose. As far as I know, I've never had a therapist or even a gynecologist ask me about it or tell me about it. And so I, fortunately, as a health and wellness writer came across it. And a couple of years ago, I went, oh my gosh, this is me. Okay, what do I do?
Right.
And, you know, this has to, and I figured it was almost the same exact trajectory that my, fortunately, you know, not as painful and severe, but when I had PTSD and I was trying to get the right diagnosis and figure out what it was and how do I treat it and what do I do, and I had all these different diagnoses thrown at me first, and so it's so important for me to how I can in any way bring more awareness to things that we live with as women. And, you know, it doesn't just affect women, right? I would venture to say that this is very important for men who are listening, because I think every man at least has one woman in his life, whether it's a partner or a sister or a coworker. And I think especially this year, right, we're seeing men taking a keener interest in what was once kind of labeled as a women's issue. And so this is so important, especially because, you know, I've spoken with Brett about some of the statistics and some of, you know, the data around what happens when women don't have the right support for this. And it is devastating. And so I'm so thrilled to have her here with us and have her get us all nice and woke on this subject and figure out what we can do to have healthier and more, you know, just healthier and more manageable lives during this time of the month.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, I want to get into that, of course, but what fascinates me is, you know, you turn this into a company, and it doesn't sound like that's what you necessarily was the trajectory, this app. So is your background then in technology?
It's actually not. I mean, I use technology like every millennial, but mine was, I've always been interested in psychology and, of course, like learning about different disorders and conditions, because I've struggled with my mental health since I was about 11, like around the time I started my period. And so no, it's not in technology, but it just kind of PMDD lends itself to needing kind of tech help, because the key to like distinguishing it from other conditions is that the tracking the symptoms, and that you see it's only in the premenstrual time. So it seemed like there needed to be an app to help women track this. Like, it wasn't just kind of like an arbitrary thing. It just seemed like it lended itself right to an app. So it was more that need that we wanted to satisfy.
Well, it's phenomenal that you've done this. What kind of things have been happening for you with this? Are you associating with other organizations, or, you know, what's sort of been happening since you've turned this into now a company?
Yes, I actually work with my mom. So just putting that out there, she's like a communications exec in her past. So we hooked up with the Gia Allemand Foundation for PMDD, and they are a relatively new organization, but they're amazing. And they're the first organization for PMDD and helping women cope and find treatments and support. And so we hooked up with them, and they're awesome. And they've provided us so many resources and helped us learn more, connected us with researchers. And so, yeah, we're kind of in a partnership with them.
Great.
That this is the app that they'll recommend to women fighting PMDD. And we recommend them because they have so many good services out there.
I love it. Young female entrepreneurs taking over the world. Fantastic. How is it working with your mom on this subject? I take it it's something that she suffered with as well.
It's actually, she didn't suffer with it, but she's just been with me through my journey. And she actually was the one who helped me eventually start tracking my symptoms, to then realize that what I was struggling with all along was PMDD. So she's just been my partner in my, my own life since the beginning. And so we have a really great relationship. We're very close, but sometimes there is some difficulty because, for one, she's not as like tech savvy, being a little bit older. But yeah, it's just like the different perspectives. It's really great to work with her. Well,
let's actually, Helaina, I'm going to turn this over to you because this is near and dear to your heart too. I'm sure you have a list of questions, being the journalist that you are.
Yeah, I do. I'm definitely a question enthusiast. I think most importantly, I know that I'm a candidate for this because I've seen the symptoms, but also because I read that women who have post-traumatic stress disorder and who have chronic migraines, of which I am a double winner on both of those fronts, which is interesting, are more likely to have this. And I'm wondering if you can share, Brett, the most recent research they found on the causes and how many women are living with this right now.
Yeah, so it's estimated that it could be about 5% of women in the reproductive years that might be fighting PMDD. So it's fairly prevalent, but a lot of people don't know, or they don't know until later on down their journey. They finally learn it's PMDD because there's not much awareness. And then the most recent causes, there was a really great study that came out in early 2017 that said that, and not to get very technical because I don't understand all of it, but just that women's genes that have PMDD are different than just a normal woman, and that it had originally been speculated that maybe that it was a hormonal imbalance that was leading to the PMDD symptoms, but now they're thinking that it's just an abnormal response to kind of the normal hormonal changes, and it might be, as like we've got the female hormones estrogen and progesterone, that as the progesterone is withdrawing from your body, that then we experience a withdrawal, and that's kind of what causes the symptoms. So it might be that it's normal hormone levels, just an abnormal response. But there's also research that it's not the main hormones, estrogen and progesterone, but it's kind of later on, I guess, metabolites of them that might be at an abnormal level, that we're converting the main hormones into too much of kind of like a secondary hormone. So there's lots of research going on, but it's really looking at the genetics and the molecular level that's causing these symptoms.
Yeah, and I sort of wonder, why do you think it is that we don't hear more about PMDD, and why do we have to diagnose it ourselves?
There's actually been a ton of controversy with PMDD in the past. I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with PMS, people thinking that that's just an excuse we're using to be a little mean sometime, but I mean, that's just really not the case when you're someone that struggles with this like we do. It's only recently been included in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So it was included in the version that came out in the 90s as like a depressive disorder, not otherwise specified. And then people continue to think this isn't actually real, people are just making excuses, and that the pharmaceutical industry is just going to use this to medicate women who really don't need anything. And they actually did that. There was Prozac, their patent was expiring, so they changed the name to Serafem, and they marketed it to PMDD when it actually didn't really have research that it was necessarily effective for PMDD or any different from the normal Prozac. And so there was a lot of, backlash, and that's not okay to do. Of course, we know that happens with a lot of pharmaceutical stuff. Yeah. But the thing was, PMDD is real, and even though it was hit with controversy, kind of people weren't looking at those of us who are actually suffering with this and saying, my life is severely impacted, so much so that I can't be a normal human. I can't do my normal life that I would want to. Meaning, for me, it's like severe depression and anxiety just that overcome me. And without the kind of treatments that I'm on now, I wouldn't be like anywhere that I am. And life wouldn't be, worth living to me if it was like that. So it was kind of an argument that PMDD might not be real, but now we're finally looking at the women who fight it and saying this really is real, and we need attention and we need research for this.
I think that's fantastic, and it's so brave and wonderful to be one of the first in any around any cause, saying, hey, this is really important. And it's such an uphill battle, and you have to have passion for it. And I think part of that comes from just the drive to want to help other women and the people in those women's lives, and part of it is because it's so personal and it affects you. And so I of course downloaded the app, and the timing could not be better, because guess what time of the month it is for me. I've been using it in real time this week, and
yay!
So everyone now knows that. And so I've been using the app And I have to say that just the action of going in and tracking things is not just going to be, I anticipate, extremely helpful for me to reflect on, and I imagine extremely helpful for women who are just starting to figure out what they're going through each month. But it's almost a moment of mindfulness where I reflect on the day, and sometimes when we're in it, we can feel overwhelmed, but when I look at it and I'm like, it felt like I kind of had a difficult day, but my anxiety was a 2, and I had some trouble sleeping, but overall, hey, it looks like I did pretty okay, and so it's almost also, it's really a time to be mindful. And as much as I look at these symptoms that are very difficult and very debilitating, I also kind of pat myself on the back a little bit and went, hey, you got through a very challenging day and you dealt with these things. So you're kind of crushing it at life. You have to do twice as much to, be a kind and productive person during this time. And you did it despite these things. And, I could certainly go through and share, all of the symptoms and the things you can track. But Brett, I think it would be so much more powerful for you to kind of walk us through, what we find when we open the app. And I saw, there's this self-love journal. And I think, it would be so great to hear just from you, how you decided and designed the app and the sliding scale, and, walk everyone through that so they know what they're going to see when they download it.
Yeah, so the app's called MevPMDD to kind of emphasize the idea that it's a battle, but I mean, it's not like PMDD is you, it's your fight with it. And so when you first download it, you can select the symptoms that you like to track, because while there's a ton of symptoms that could be related to PMDD, not everyone gets them. It's different from person to person. So we have a bunch of emotional symptoms like anger, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, mood swings, sadness, even thoughts of suicide, and then mental, anxiety, panic attacks, overthinking. And then also PMDD can come with a lot of physical symptoms, for some women more so than others, but just a lot of those PMS symptoms like back pain, change in appetite, headache, nausea, tiredness, weight gain. And then there's some additional ones about lack of interest, daily activities, lack of interest in relationships or sex, relationship difficulty and conflict. So we just have a ton of symptoms, and I've selected the ones that I like to track because not all of them hit me. And then on the main screen, it asks you, how are you feeling today? And then you go in and you set the level for each symptom for that day. It's on a 0 to 10 sliding scale. So you think, okay, I was pretty irritable today. I would say that was really a 5. That was pretty tough. And you can also set overall, or maybe say, I really didn't struggle with any mood swings. I'm going to keep that at a 0. But it's just kind of setting the severity for what you experience. Because I feel like that's important too, because other period tracking mood apps, they kind of ask, did you have that today? But then it's like, well, I did, but I tracked it at another day and that was way more severe than today. So I really like the severity, and I wanted that for myself personally, to be able to track different severity. Then you can also see your data, and right now we have it based on just calendar days of seeing how your symptoms change throughout the month. But in an update coming soon, we're going to make it go according with the cycle, so that you'll see, okay, cycle day 1, your symptoms were whatever they were. So that'll be coming soon. And then we've got a self-love journal, which our intention was kind of just to encourage some journaling all about PMDD, and also encouraging yourself and empowering yourself to get through this in any way that you can, and using that journal as a kind of therapeutic coping mechanism. Then we also have a treatment tracking section, which I found surprisingly helpful because I'm taking different supplements and medications. And of course, you go to the doctor and they do your, what are you taking right now? And it's kind of hard to remember. And then also when you're refilling for the week, you've got it right there, okay, that's a morning medication and all that. So that's actually surprisingly helpful, just because it's hard to remember what you're doing all. And then we also connect to online resources and the Gia Allemand Foundation's peer support service. which they do one-on-one kind of like peer counseling sessions that you can just kind of go in and be like, this is my experience. Do you think this sounds like PMDD? What should I do? And so we connect right to that because we love that service. And I'm also a volunteer for the peer support, the Gia Allemand Foundation.
I love this because you actually also created something that encourages self-care.
Mm-hmm. And that's huge with PMDD. It's like in addition to getting some treatment that helps, it's just noticing when you're feeling not so great and knowing that it's okay to take the day to be kind to yourself instead of just pushing through, that it might be better for you and for your family and your job and all that, just to take it easy and do what you have to do to get it through.
Anything that encourages women to not constantly stuff their feelings, their emotions, their symptoms down in order to take care of everyone else is a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how I would have, I'm 48, so I'm definitely past my millennial years. I'm sitting here listening to you both and thinking, man, what I could have done. Of course, there weren't apps at that time, the time that I was suffering from this, but what an eye-opener it would have been for me to just pay attention to myself and my body.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, and the thing that really struck me the most the first time you and I were in touch was that statistic you shared with me, which is very, very upsetting, that it was found that 15% of women who have this take their own lives. Mm-hmm. And I think we should talk a little bit about it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is suicidal ideation, which is, thinking of suicide or making plans and whatnot, is really common with PMDD. Of course, it's common with, other mental health conditions like depression, but just, PMDD, it's common because it's just so persistent and it can get very hopeless. And the statistics are actually that, suicidal ideation for a normal population of women would be about 13%, but then for PMDD women, it's 37%, which is, very sad, but it's just it's something very common and it needs to be paid attention to because that's just not okay. And it's not okay that there's not enough support and solid treatments that, 15% of women are thinking the only way to escape is really to go through with plans to end their own lives. And I just do not think that's okay because there are diseases that kill you, but then there are some that make you want to kill yourself. And just to think of it that way, to think that the suffering is so great that it makes life feel not worth living.
Right.
I feel like that's a really interesting way to put mental health conditions.
So in terms of this happening and this being taken seriously, what has your experience been in the community and especially the mental health and the just healthcare community with creating an app like this and making this, something that obviously it's unique, but I'm wondering if there's been any backlash or what have you experienced? I know we do having the symptoms, but in terms of putting this in the forefront and creating a company out of it.
Our reception has been fairly good, although it's been mostly from people that are fighting this themselves, and they're just kind of thankful that we're another voice that's getting out there about this and, giving a way to support yourself to fight it, but also raising awareness. And it's difficult. I've been talking about it more with friends and family, and it is difficult to bring up because it's, not very well understood, of course, but mostly a good reception for us so far.
Good. How about you, Helaina, and you're, talking about this and with your personal life? How has it been for you to bring this up?
When I first started looking around and realizing that this was a thing, I've always been an immediate fly into action person. So I called on
that surprises me.
I told my therapist, I was like, hey, I think this is going on. And I told my primary care doctor, and I told my gynecologist, and I started to write articles about it, which is also what I do anytime something happens to me. I'm like, great, I will use the depths of my soul and pain and struggle to help other people. And I have absolutely no qualms about that. And so I just started to find out as much information as I could. And I started to look at, what are the treatments? What do you need? And it's really like being a different person for a certain number of days a month, like something that I normally would not even pay attention to or brush off is suddenly, devastating. It's really, so what I, did was I spoke to my husband, who was wonderful. I mean, really wonderful in terms of supporting, my mental health and nurturing our relationship. And I said to him, listen, this is a difficult time of the month, and I want you to know, like, every month that, like, I'm going to try very hard to have this impact you and us as little as possible. And I, in advance, I'm just letting you know, like, I'm going to be more irritable. I'm going to be a little bit quicker probably to anger. I'm probably going to cry at dog videos on Facebook. Like, I'm going and I thank you so much in advance for supporting me. And if it becomes too much, I really want you to kind of take my hand and look me in the eye and say, like, I know that this is a lot for you, and if you could take a breath and calm down right now, that would be great. And and we manage, I just do. And I'm very open about saying that what I had prescribed for the days that are particularly brutal is Valium, and it's a low dose, but it helps to balance out the severe chemical imbalance that I feel in the days leading up to and during my period. And I only take that on a day where I feel extremely out of whack. Otherwise I use all these, I've been fortunate in that through years and years of therapy and recovery from different things, that I have, my go-to skills and tools and social supports and all those things. And so, but even then, like, it's tough. It's still tough, like, there's just going to be moments where, and then when I tell myself, I'm like, listen, like, you're in that time, like, what you're feeling now is probably not how you're going to feel about this, or so you got to just hang in and don't make any big decisions right now, and don't, and be gentle with yourself. And that can be the biggest challenge of all, is be gentle with yourself and have compassion for yourself. And, please, seek out support from friends, like, laugh about these things if you can, cry about these things, talk about these things if you need to. I don't think I could do it without a therapist and my sponsor. Certainly having, the medication I take as needed is important for me. And every month is sometimes different too. So I just stay super aware, and my priority for that time of the month is doing what I have to do to be the best possible Helaina that I can be that month. And I know that the feelings are so powerful that they can make you think very dark things. So, and when we get in those places, we have to reach out, we have to talk, like, in whatever way you're comfortable. Like, we gotta support each other. We can't, like you said, Kristin, we can't kind of be alone in it and kind of go off into the dark. We have to put it out there.
Yeah, that's the interesting piece. That's with depression also, definitely, and not making decisions based on how you're feeling at the moment. That is so difficult, because the emotions are so overwhelming that you think that they're going to be there forever, and that's just not the case unless it's severe and persistent depression. But I have a question for you, Brett. Can the symptoms be worse for women depending on which ovary is releasing the egg that month?
I have not seen, like, academic research on this, but I've heard it anecdotally from a lot of women saying that it's kind of one month's terrible, the next month not so bad. Next month terrible, it's kind of like it does go like that. So I have heard that.
Okay, because that's something that I've experienced and still experience today. I can have a month where it's a breeze. I barely even notice, other than, what you can't help but notice when you have your period. But then the next month will be pain and, just a lot more symptoms going on, more anxiety and so on. So I always thought, well, that's interesting. And then I was able to track that just in my head. This is going to be a more difficult month. So be prepared. And now I have an app to help me remember that, because I am getting older. So, the memory fades a little. So that's interesting that's part of it, as that can be part of it as well. I also know women that I think 2% of women, once they become pregnant, suffer so badly from a lot of the symptoms that I'm reading on your site. I know it doesn't have to do with their period anymore, but all those hormones that are coming into play and changes in your body, that they can have an absolutely horrific pregnancy just because their body cannot tolerate the flood of hormones coming in. And I have found in speaking with them that they also experienced pretty heavy duty periods as well, that seems to be a correlation. Is that anything that you've heard?
I've heard that for some, pregnancy can actually be like this blissful time when things are actually remarkably better than they were, normal time, but also it could be the opposite. Right. And that's kind of just because what I've heard about the hormone levels is that it's like the Goldilocks levels. It's like that it's either too little or too much, and that there's kind of like a mid-range that's perfect. So it's kind of, for different women, it could be the fact that hormones are too little, and it could be the fact that they're too much. So pregnancy can go either way, from what I've heard.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was the too much side. I wish I would have had a blissful pregnancy, but it's an interesting thing, because there's so much negativity around this, and so much is made fun of about women and their emotions during their periods and so on. And I don't find that as much today as in my past, but it's still lingering out there. So when you hear things like that, if you do, Brett, and also you, Helaina, how is your response to that kind of real negative stereotyping of what is a very real problem for many, many women, obviously?
When I hear things like that, it's usually, reading blogs online that I shouldn't be reading. But it is hurtful just to think about my experience and what I've gone through, and that I would not wish this on another human, and then to think that someone's feeling like it's not real, or that I just need to get over it. And I think back in my history, and that those were my thoughts about myself, like growing up. And then I put myself through more pain by telling myself, I just need to get over this. I need to stop being so weak. And that now, like, finally realizing what I'm fighting, and that, taking action to fight it, I'm in a much better headspace. And so when I see that kind of reaction, it does hurt, but I'm trying to just separate it and say, you can't understand what you don't, experience. It's really hard to do that. Just trying to just remember what I understand about myself.
Right. And how about, Helaina, let's have you answer that question. And then I want to get into what are men's reaction to this in general that you both have found. But Helaina, please answer the first question first.
Sure. To me, I feel like two things. One, that I'm really hoping that this becomes part of the Me Too Time's Up conversation.
Yes.
Where we stop invalidating the experiences of women who have felt like they cannot talk about this in a unified way and have their experiences honored. And I could go on and on, but I think everyone knows exactly what I say. Well, what I mean when I say that. And we all are walking around with some sort of invisible, let's, for lack of a better word, condition, right? We're all walking around with past trauma. Some of us are living with chronic pain. Some of us are in a situation where maybe we're losing a loved one. Some of us, even if you need glasses, that's a condition, to invalidate anybody's experience. All I can say about that is people who invalidate the experience of others and try to push it away, I have found are suffering themselves and have not received the kind of compassion that we have to give ourselves. I think there's a lot of anger there. Now, I can't obviously make the presumption and speak for those people. But like, why would you feel moved to disclaim or invalidate somebody else's experience unless you've had that happen to you? You know what I mean? That's sort of my feeling. And I think that there's a lot of bravery through suffering and making it through that suffering and coming out on the other side. And I think, Kristin, I know you wanted to ask another question, but I actually have been super interested in asking Brett. I've been wondering, when it comes to Brett, you know, how you found meaning through your experience,
Good
through
question.
everything you've been through and through this suffering. I know that for me, that was quite a journey when it came to post-traumatic stress disorder and alcoholism. And when we do come out on the other side, you know, we recover and we get better, but it's still something we live with. And so I think it's so important to hear what your experience was with finding that meaning and coming out on the other side, and still, you know, what your kind of personal philosophy is when it comes to the day-to-day.
I feel like I've found meaning in all this suffering by making the app, that's my way to make it better for other people like myself that are fighting this. And also, I've also been active in, like, they have Facebook support groups and just, you know, talking with other people, sharing, oh, I went through this and I did this and that helped me. And then that it's just kind of sharing that knowledge with each other. And that's really powerful. But then also realizing, even when I have those moments where I'm like, I really wish I didn't have this. I wish I was just normal. Although you're right that everybody struggles with something. And then thinking that I am where I am and with these unique opportunities because of this sad thing that I've had to fight. And it's like, that's really neat. You know, it's not fun, but it's really powerful to be able to be helping myself and others with this. And so my kind of personal philosophy with the app and helping other women with PMDD came after I was reading over the summer Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And it talks about, there's a quote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds its meaning. And I was reading that kind of right before we started working on the app. And I've kind of tried to let that guide me, that every bad experience is just something else, like Helaina, you said, that something you can write about, something you can share with other people. You can use what the profound experiences you've gone through to, you know, help others. So that's the meaning I found in this.
That's fantastic. I just had a couple of aha moments listening to you even say that about some of the work that we do here. So thanks for that. I love that book. That's been an important book in my life too. Well, last question from me is, you know, around how men's reaction have been about this with the two of you.
For me, I feel I might be a little bit of an anomaly, that I've had a lot of good supportive men in my life. Like, my dad's very supportive of me, although he really doesn't understand this and he does struggle with, you know, knowing what he should say or what he should do. But he's just been open to letting me guide him and having my mom help him understand better. And then with some boyfriends I've had, kind of the same thing. They were really open to supporting me, but it's just difficult to know what to do. But I really do struggle with talking about this to any male, because I luckily haven't had to go through it myself. But for a lot of women, PMDD can, like, break a relationship just because it's hard to understand. And that's a really common thing too. And also that a lot of times doctors, since this isn't so well known, especially a male doctor, might just say, no, that's not possible. PMDD doesn't exist, which is pretty common as well. So it's I do feel that fear of telling other people, especially men, what this is like for me, and feeling like they might not understand it. But luckily, I've been kind of fortunate that I've had supportive guys in my life.
Good. How about you, Helaina?
Yeah, you know, I think I probably said most of it earlier. Again, you know, as I mentioned earlier, my husband is wonderful in that he always seeks to understand. And I think making sure that we communicate clearly to the men in our lives and the men around us, those who are closest to us, those who need to know, you know, what we're going through and what we need. And what we need is different for everyone. And, I did have an ex-boyfriend who would say, oh, PMS, that's just you women use that as an excuse to throw around, to just do whatever you want. And I was like,
yeah,
absolutely not. And that is why he's my ex-boyfriend. And, I think that, and again, I think that might have been indicative of some hurt that he had, that he felt he had to swallow and man up about and not acknowledge. I really do think that people discount what others are going through. There's something going on there. But my husband is, look, I mean, he's not a saint. Like if I'm, a rapid fire, mild rampage about like, and why is your coat on the chair instead of in the hanger? And why is that? He's just like, calm down. Like, but for the most part, he's really understanding. There have been some really bad days where, like he's human, and if I'm yelling, like at some point he might yell back, right? But for the most part, every month I'm just like, how can I do better this month? How can we do better this month? And I really am so fortunate to have found someone who's not only understanding, but willing to understand more and willing to talk and willing to try and give me what I need. And yeah, I do. I don't mean to gush, but
no, it's wonderful. This is what people want to hear, what your lived experience.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I've been through some real rough relationships and, just not great dudes. And so I do feel very lucky that my partner is someone who really is so thoughtful and considerate. And, and if he does, if he doesn't know what to do, he'll ask, and he's like, sometimes it's a deer in the headlights, like, I don't know what to do right now. And so I'll tell him, so yeah. And, who's the other man in my life, I guess, is my dad. And, I didn't know. I mean, now obviously, I'm not living with him anymore, but I think once, you've got PMDD, you've probably had it for a while. And all I can say is that, I'm also lucky enough to have a very compassionate father who believes very strongly in getting the help you need for any sort of, for health, for mental health. And so I've always been very empowered to say, you know what, if I need this medication, like that's not a weakness. That's, that's something I need to feel okay. And I don't need to feel ashamed about it and feel, you know what I mean? I think there are some people whose philosophy is, that, oh, medication, but I think it's really helped to have someone who's so pro taking care of ourselves when it comes to our health. So,
fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
Are there any last questions that you wanted to ask, Helaina?
I think my final question would be over to Brett. My main question would be for women who are listening to this right now, who are starting to, have the realization that this is something that probably affects them. They're going to look at the symptoms. They're going to look at treatments. What do you think, what would be your next best step? Like, first things first, like, as you go about on this journey to figure out what's right for you. Obviously, downloading this app is a brilliant idea, and it's free, and it's fantastic. And when it comes to seeking out support, and, it might feel overwhelming, like, where do I go and what do I do? What would your kind of initial advice be for women who want to proactively start to improve their lives who are living with this?
So definitely the first thing, track your symptoms. Use our app or another app or journal it, whatever, just to get to know what's your experience. So then you can just really tackle that. You can see if it's PMDD, maybe it's not. Just know what you go through. And then you can share what you've tracked and learned with your doctor, but not all doctors know about PMDD or have, a great awareness of how we can treat it. So there's also, I've mentioned them a couple times, the Gia Allemand Foundation. They have peer support, so you can talk to those ladies about, like, what should I do? What's my next steps based on my experience? They also have a provider directory to find, people, a doctor, hopefully in your area, that understands this and is already treating women and having some success. And then for kind of like personal support, if you're on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, just search PMDD, and there's a bunch of Facebook support groups, which are awesome. They could be a little overwhelming, but it's great to connect with people that you don't even know who are going through this similar experience and have been there and can help you. And then on Instagram, there's a really cool PMDD awareness thing growing. So that's neat to find out there as well. And then Twitter, you can search PMDD Peeps, and there's lots of posts and lots of women out there willing to talk about this and just using their own experience to help others, which is kind of like a defining maybe characteristic of people that fight PMDD, that we just want to use it to help others, which is, I mean, really awesome. So yeah, those would be my recommendations. But just track, and learn what you're going through, and then track how you go about, fighting it or self-caring it and all that. So that's what I'd say.
Fantastic. And I want to make sure our listeners know where they can find you. It's MeV, as in Victor, PMDD.com is the site. And you'll be looking for the Rosie the Riveter fist up in your logo, which I love. And I wanted to, just say thank you, Helaina, for finally we have this discussion out. So thank you so much for introducing us to Brett and bringing Brett to us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us both on.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Brett, we need more women like the two of you out there that will not sit down and be quiet, that are doing things like what the two of you are doing. So from an older woman, thank you so much for both of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And thanks to our listeners for another edition of Mental Health News Radio. Get ready for it, because here it comes. But first, thank you again to our sponsors like EverythingEHR.com, devoted to helping organizations finding the best electronic health record in behavioral health, and Service Dogs by Warren Retrievers, SDWR.org, a nonprofit organization that provides service dogs to those with unique abilities and invisible diseases, to include autism, diabetes, epilepsy, and PTSD. Until there's a cure, there's a dog. And hey, an SDWR service dog is at work every day with one of our own team members. If you have a question, visit us at mentalhealthnewsradio.com or our network of podcasters at mhnrnetwork.com. Disruptors, healers, technologists, advocates, and most importantly, voices to be heard from all corners of the globe. Thank you so much for joining us. And now a final word from our therapy dog, Miles.
Good boy.